My own parents threw me out just so my golden child sister could move in, even though I was the one who bought the house. But life has a way of evening the score quicker than you'd expect. I'm 35 now and have spent the past 17 years climbing the ladder in senior management at a top investment firm. This story is about the tangled relationship I've had with my older sister Allison, who's 10 years ahead of me at 45, and our parents, both in their late 70s. And at the center of all this tension is the house I purchased for them, which somehow turned into a battleground for our family drama. To really understand it all, I've got to take you back to the beginning. My folks were already in their late 40s when I came along. I was definitely not part of their life plan. My mom used to casually mention how Allison, who was 10 at the time, had been plenty for them. She didn't say it to be cruel, but the way she said it made it sting even more. I'd often hear her say things like, "We didn't plan for you," while she busied herself with Allison's after-school schedules or was knee-deep in her college applications. These little remarks were constant reminders that I wasn't really meant to be there, and they shaped how I saw myself growing up. Truth be told, if it hadn't been for my grandparents, my mom's parents, I might not have been around at all. My parents saw me as an inconvenience they hadn't asked for, while my grandparents were overjoyed at the thought of another grandchild. It didn't take long to figure out that I was never really a priority in my parents' world. Every morning, like clockwork, they'd drop me off at my grandparents' place. My dad would hand me over and mutter to my grandpa, "You wanted her," as he jingled his keys, heading off to work. "She's all yours." Their house quickly became my real home, the only place where I truly felt loved and accepted. They made sure I was fed, helped me with my schoolwork, picked me up each day, and even took me to the park. My grandpa, a retired math professor, spent hours teaching me problem solving and helping me understand numbers. He'd always say, "Numbers never lie. They'll tell you the truth even when people won't." Those words stuck with me and ended up shaping my career more than I ever expected. In the afternoons, I'd sit at the kitchen table while my grandma, who used to be a high school teacher, walked me through my homework with endless patience. She'd always remind me in that gentle but firm tone of hers, "The one thing no one can take from you is what you know." She also taught me how to cook, not as some kind of chore but as a way to show love and creativity. Those evenings in her kitchen, reviewing the school day and measuring ingredients just right, turned into some of my favorite memories. As for my parents, they usually showed up late to pick me up, looking worn out and annoyed from the drive. Every night, my grandma would hug me and say, "Erin, you're the best thing that ever happened to us." And in that moment, wrapped in her arms, I could almost forget that I wasn't really wanted anywhere else. My grandparents became my foundation, giving me the kind of love and steadiness I never got at home. My grandpa liked to say, "Sometimes the best things in life aren't planned." I held on to that, even as I learned how to navigate life as someone who felt like an extra in her own family story. While Allison prepared to take on the world, I faded into the background. She never treated me badly, but it was like I didn't exist to her. I remember sitting on the living room floor playing with my dolls while she stretched out on the couch, chatting about emails and college stuff like I wasn't even there. The difference in how my parents treated us couldn't have been more obvious. I'd hear my mom brag to relatives and neighbors about Allison's perfect report cards, how she made the debate team, or that she got into her dream college. They were at every one of her school events, science fairs, debates, everything. When it came to me, their reasons for not showing up were always the same: "We're too tired" or "We've got work." I was supposed to understand, and I did, at least I pretended to. Meanwhile, my grandparents showed up to everything, proud as could be. I thought maybe things would shift after Allison went off to college. I was the one left at home, so maybe now they'd notice me. But I couldn't have been more wrong. Instead of finally being seen, I was turned into the family maid by the time I was 15. I hadn't even set my backpack down after school before my mom would call out, "Erin, ready with another chore. The house needs to be cleaned. Start with the bathrooms." That's what I'd hear the moment I walked in the door. Allison's chores somehow became mine, along with a bunch of new ones nobody asked her to do. Before long, I knew the washing machine better than most people know their phones. That thing became part of my daily routine. Cleaning, cooking, doing laundry, it all felt like a never-ending cycle, keeping up a home for parents who barely even acknowledged I was there. If I hesitated at all, my dad would throw out, "You live here, don't you?" Then pitch in, "Your sister always helped." By the time I was 15, I'd gone from just cleaning to being fully in charge of making dinner. There was no transition. One day, my mom simply stopped cooking. The next morning, she looked at me and said, "You're old enough now. We expect dinner on the table when we get home from work." Even with all that pressure at home, I somehow managed to keep my grades up. My teachers noticed I had a knack for economics and math, and they encouraged me to join different academic competitions. My grandfather would sit with me in the evenings, going over advanced material most kids my age hadn't even heard of. "You've got a real gift for numbers," he'd say with pride glowing in his face. "Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." I used to escape by daydreaming about college. After doing the dishes, I'd head to my room, sit at my desk, and scroll through college websites, picturing myself walking across distant campuses, far from the cold silence and constant chores back home. All my hard work paid off. Despite everything I had on my plate, I pulled straight A's, and by the time I was 16, I started getting acceptance letters from several top-tier colleges, especially ones with strong finance programs. And then came Allison's big news. One Sunday, she burst through the front door with a tall, polished-looking guy in tow. Beaming, she yelled, "Mom, Dad, this is Eric. We're getting married." You'd think she'd announced she'd won $1 million. My mom started crying with joy. My dad jumped up to call every relative he knew, and just like that, they were in full celebration mode. My mom hugged Allison tight and said, "Don't worry about a thing. We'll pay for everything. Our first daughter's wedding has to be perfect." The house turned into a wedding factory. Every conversation was about venues, floral arrangements, and guest lists. Money didn't seem to matter: designer clothes, top-tier vendors, over-the-top everything. It was like money grew on trees all of a sudden. My grandparents went to the wedding, but I could tell they weren't impressed with all the flash. My grandpa just shook his head at the champagne fountain, and I caught my grandma frowning at a ridiculous sculpture that probably cost more than a year's tuition. Maybe they already had a sense of what was coming. They kept their opinions to themselves, though. Then came the day my college letters arrived. I sat at the dinner table with 3 envelopes laid out in front of me, my heart pounding. "I got in," I said, barely able to contain my excitement. My mom didn't even look up from her plate. "That's nice," she muttered. "But we can't pay for it. We used up everything on your sister's wedding. Even had to take out a loan. There's nothing left for college." I was stunned. I barely got the words out. "But you paid for Allison's college." My voice was quiet, like I already knew what they were going to say. "That was different," my mom replied, her tone sharp. "We saw potential in her." It felt like someone knocked the air out of me. Then my dad chimed in, chewing between words: "Get a job, save up, take out some loans. That's what grown-ups do." I'd never dared leave the dinner table without asking first, but that night, I couldn't stay. With shaky hands, I grabbed my phone and called my grandma. Minutes later, I was stepping through the front door of the only home that ever felt safe, tears rolling down my face. As I told them everything, I noticed my grandfather's expression harden. But behind his serious look, there was something else, like he'd expected this. He and my grandma shared a quiet glance, and then he took my hand and said, "Aaron, we've been putting money aside for your education since the day you were born. We figured something like this might happen." He went to his study and came back with a folder full of bank documents. Years and years of careful saving were all there in black and white. "Pick any of those schools," he told me. "We've got it covered." That very night, I packed a small bag and moved in with them. When I told my parents I was leaving, they were downstairs watching TV. They barely even looked up. My mom didn't even glance away from the television when she said, "Whatever you think is best." But I could swear there was a hint of relief in her voice. What came next changed everything for me. I enrolled at one of the top business schools to study financial analysis. I think watching my parents mishandle money for so long lit a fire in me to do the exact opposite. My professors quickly noticed my focus and natural talent for numbers. Pretty soon, I was staying after class, diving into complex financial theories most students hadn't touched yet. For the first time outside of my grandparents, someone saw something real in me, actual potential. During college, I landed prestigious internships with major firms. Each summer brought new challenges and new chances to prove myself. The senior leaders I worked under were impressed by how detail-oriented and sharp I was. I'll never forget one review at Goldman Sachs when my manager said, "You've got a real feel for this. We'd love to have you back next year." Aside from regular calls with my grandparents, I kept to myself, buried in coursework, rarely thinking about the rest of my family. After graduation, I landed a job at one of the top financial firms in the city. The starting salary blew my expectations out of the water. I found a small but clean and safe one-bedroom apartment. Every morning, I felt thankful that I only had to make breakfast for me. I poured all my energy into my work, and it paid off: promotions, bonuses, new opportunities one never thought were possible. Within 5 years, I worked my way into a senior position, managing complex portfolios and building relationships with high-profile clients. In the industry, I became known for being sharp, precise, and strategic. Every achievement was a quiet reminder that my parents had been wrong about me. Meanwhile, during my occasional check-ins with my grandparents, I heard that Allison's marketing career wasn't going so well. And Eric, her husband, couldn't hold down steady work. They were constantly asking my parents for help. In one of our regular phone calls, my grandma told me, "Your mother emptied her retirement fund last month just to cover their rent. She still can't say no to Allison." Within a year, things got worse. Even with help from our parents, Allison and Eric couldn't keep up with their bills. Eventually, they packed up their things along with their 7-year-old twins and moved into my old bedroom. The same parents who once bragged about Allison's bright future were now supporting her entire household. I kept my distance and focused on building the life I had carved out for myself. Each promotion, every deal closed, and every bonus felt like proof that I wasn't the disappointment they once made me feel like. By my mid-30s, I'd built up solid investments and enough savings to put down on a house. And then everything changed. Out of nowhere, my grandfather passed away from a massive heart attack. It hit me hard. He wasn't just my grandpa, he was the father I never really had. The one person who always stood by me. My grandmother, who had been with him for over 50 years, seemed to fade soon after. She passed away less than 3 months later. In every way that counted, they had been my true parents. And suddenly they were both gone. While I was arranging my grandma's funeral at the funeral home, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Aaron, do you want help with any of this?" I turned around and saw my mother. She looked older, more tired than I remembered. Part of me wanted to ask her to leave right then, but something about the way she looked made me pause. I just nodded. "Sure. That'd be helpful." Over the next few days, as we worked through the funeral arrangements, my parents began to open up. Bit by bit, they admitted they were struggling. One afternoon, while picking out flowers, my dad quietly confessed, "We've been having money trouble ever since we retired." My dad quietly added that they were barely scraping by, then brought up Allison's twins. It hit me then, my sister and her whole family were still living off my parents' shrinking retirement income. A week after we buried my grandmother, we all met in a stuffy, wood-paneled office for the will reading. Allison and Eric were slouched in recliners beside our parents, while I sat across from them. The air felt heavy, thick with tension, and the room smelled like old paperwork and furniture polish. None of us knew it at the time, but what happened next would change everything in our family for good. Mr. Whitaker, the notary, adjusted his glasses and began reading in a dry, steady tone. I expected the usual legal wording, but then he said something that made everyone sit up straight. "To our beloved granddaughter Erin, we leave the house at 823 Willow Lane in the amount of $170,000. You could have heard a pin drop. My mom clutched my dad's arm so hard her knuckles turned white. Allison's jaw dropped. Mr. Whitaker cleared his throat and continued. He looked straight at my mother and read a note from my grandfather. "Remember, Linda, that we gave you $250,000 when you needed it most. Just as we honored your needs then, we trust you'll respect our final decision now." My mom's face went from flushed red to ghostly pale. Allison and Eric exchanged nervous glances and my dad stared at the floor in silence. Once Mr. Whitaker packed up and left, my parents followed me to the parking lot. Gone was the calm front they put on during the funeral arrangements. Now they just looked desperate. My mom's voice trembled as she said, "Aaron, sweetheart, we always thought we'd be the ones to inherit the house. We've been struggling. We were counting on it." My dad chimed in, rubbing his temples. "The mortgage, Allison's family, things are tight. That house would really help us right now." Allison jumped in too, talking about how her kids needed a yard to play in. But I didn't say a word. I just got in my car and drove away. Over the next few weeks, I kept thinking about what my grandparents had left me. I had built a solid life closer to the city, and as much as I loved the memories tied to that house, it was far too big for me alone. Meanwhile, I kept hearing about my parents' worsening financial problems during our weekly phone calls. Supporting Allison and her family had drained their savings, and now they were struggling to make their own mortgage payments. I spent a lot of time thinking about what to do. Eventually, I came to a decision. I'd sell the house I inherited and, using that money along with my own savings, buy my parents a more manageable place, a cozy, single-story home with a lovely yard and easier upkeep. Something peaceful and practical for their retirement years. When I told them my plan, I didn't expect their reaction. They both broke down in tears. Real emotional tears. A few weeks of house hunting later, we found the perfect place, a beautiful ranch-style house with wide doorways and no stairs, nestled in a quiet neighborhood. They were over the moon when the sale closed. My dad even said we need to throw a proper housewarming party. It's the least we can do after all you've done. That sounds great, I replied, thinking it'd be the perfect moment to give them the deed as a surprise. I asked, just let me know when. But weeks passed with no invite. I had work to focus on, but I kept wondering why I hadn't heard anything. Every time I asked, my mom would say something vague like, "Oh, we're still figuring things out. You know these things take time." My dad echoed it with, "We want everything to be perfect. We'll let you know soon." Something about their tone just didn't sit right. Then one night, after yet another dodgy phone call from my mom, I typed Allison's name into Facebook. We weren't connected on any social media and I hadn't looked at her page in years. And there it was posted just a few hours earlier. "I'm so excited for this Saturday's housewarming party for Mom and Dad. Can't wait to celebrate with everyone in their beautiful new home." Dozens of friends and family had commented and RSVP'd. The photos showed catering setups and decorations in progress. This wasn't some casual get-together. They'd been planning it for weeks. Hands trembling, I picked up my phone and called my mom. "Hi, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I wanted to ask you about this housewarming party. Do you have a date in mind yet?" I asked. "Oh, sweetie, not quite," my mom answered casually. "Probably in a few weeks. We're still ironing out the details." Apparently, I was the only one left out of those details. As that Saturday approached, I found myself at a crossroads. Do I confront them? Do I just let it slide? After everything I had done, buying them that house, how could they exclude me from something like this? The answer came, though not the way I expected. That Saturday, I parked my car a block away from the house I had bought for my parents. From the street, I could see dozens of people gathered inside, Allison's friends, family, people I barely recognized. My dad was giving proud tours of the place while my mom stood at the front door in her pearls, smiling and greeting guests. Twinkle lights were strung around the house and banners saying "Welcome" flapped in the breeze. Laughter and music spilled out onto the sidewalk. It was clear they'd been planning this party for weeks and had intentionally kept me out of it. I sat in my car for a bit, watching Allison's kids running around the yard, weaving through crowds of adults who beamed at them. Through the front window, I spotted moving boxes with Allison's handwriting stacked neatly in a corner. They had already started moving her family in. Taking a deep breath, I slipped in through the side door. The smell of fresh flowers and catered food hit me right away. I followed the sound of voices until I heard my dad speaking to a group. "After all these years of hard work, we finally made it, our dream home," he said proudly. My mom jumped in with a smile, and let's not forget Allison. She helped so much with the down payment. "She's always been such a thoughtful daughter," she added. "So focused on family, unlike some people." Then someone asked about me. My mom shook her head. "Our younger daughter? She hasn't lifted a finger to help us. Too caught up in her fancy career to care about her own family." My face burned as I stood silently in the doorway. Then I stepped forward and said, "Actually, I think you've got that a little backwards." The room went quiet. You could feel the air freeze. My dad was the first to react, giving me a tight smile. "Aaron, what a surprise. Especially since no one invited me to the housewarming," I replied, stepping farther into the room. "You know, the one for the house I bought." The silence got even heavier. Allison's husband suddenly found great interest in his shoes, and one of the twins tugged on Allison's sleeve, asking why everyone looked upset. My mom raised her chin and said sharply, "You may have paid for it, but it's our home now. You can't expect us to be grateful forever." My dad nodded like he'd found his courage again. "She's right. And honestly, you're not welcome here. This is a family event." Then my mom added, "Allison and her family are moving in, by the way. They already sold their house. It's all been arranged. The kids need a place to grow up." I calmly pulled a folder from my bag. "Seems like there's been a misunderstanding," I said as I held out the deed and ownership documents. "This house is mine. I never signed anything over to you." My mom's face drained of color. My dad started stammering about his duty to care for his family. "And Allison?" Her smug smile vanished when she realized this wasn't going her way. Even though my hands were shaking, I stood my ground. "I was actually going to sign it over tonight," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I wanted this to be a fresh start for all of us. But now I see that nothing's changed. You can't do this to us," my mother shouted, her voice rising into a shriek. "We're your parents." "No," I said quietly but clearly. You're just the people who brought me into the world. My real parents were the ones who raised me, my grandparents. They taught me that being family means more than just blood. They also taught me how to handle money. That's why I own this house and you don't. I turned to the stunned guests. I'm sorry, but the party's over. This is my house and I'm asking everyone to leave. And they did. My parents, Allison, Eric, the twins, all of them left with tears in their eyes and shame on their faces. I stood on the front porch and watched one car after another pull away until the whole street was quiet again. The yard still shimmered with party lights, now looking a little sad under the night sky. Inside, the place was a mess, half-empty drinks, dirty plates, and reminders of a celebration I was never meant to be part of. What was meant to be a peace offering, the house, ended up being the breaking point. Not long after, I found out they'd used the money from selling their old home to buy an apartment. A place meant for two somehow became the new home for 3 generations once Allison, Eric, and the twins moved in with them. At first, the calls came constantly. I'd get voicemails full of anger, things like, "You've turned into exactly what your grandparents warned us about," or guilt trips like, "How could you treat your own family this way?" Eventually, I shut it all down. Blocked their phone numbers, emails, even removed them from social media. The house, now empty, just sat there as a quiet symbol of everything that had gone wrong. Tomorrow I've got a meeting with a real estate agent. It's time to move on. Some things aren't worth fixing. Just like old photos tucked away in a forgotten album, some relationships belong in the past. That night at the party, that moment of clarity laid bare every truth I hadn't wanted to face. I'd walked into the house I purchased and found a full-on celebration underway. Dozens of people, trays of catered food, decorations, and, perhaps most telling of all, moving boxes labeled in Allison's handwriting. Standing there, hearing those words, was like reliving every moment I'd ever felt ignored or treated like an afterthought. Every time Allison had been the favorite. Every time I'd been overlooked. In that doorway, it was like a fog lifted. I blocked them all. The house stood empty, not as the bridge I hoped to build, but as proof that some gaps aren't meant to be crossed. Eventually, I sold it. The money helped me invest in my future. People have asked if I'd ever consider forgiving them, ever try to reconnect. But I came to learn that forgiveness doesn't always mean opening the door again. Sometimes real forgiveness is allowing yourself to walk away and not looking back. Right before I tucked away the old wedding photo of my parents, I made a quiet promise to my future kids they'd never feel the sting of being loved only when convenient, or be compared to a sibling like some competition, or question where they stand in the family. That kind of favoritism and guilt-tripping stops with me. The last time I drove past my parents' apartment, Allison's twins were running around in the cramped little courtyard. For a moment, a wave of sadness hit me, but not for what I'd lost. It was for what never truly existed to begin with. My grandparents had shown me that real family is built on love, respect, and standing by each other. Not just shared DNA. And I carry those lessons with me into this next chapter of life. Love isn't something that should have strings attached. And family isn't defined by blood alone. Sometimes walking away really is the healthiest thing you can do. There was one last email from my mother I hadn't opened. I deleted it without reading a word. Whatever blame or excuses were in there didn't matter anymore. I'd finally learned to value myself more than their approval that always came with conditions. That kind of family loyalty doesn't belong in the life I'm working to build now. What lies ahead is mine to shape, without the weight of trying to earn love from people who never knew how to give it freely. Thanks to my grandparents, I know what real family looks like. And when the time comes, I'll create that kind of family for myself, built on mutual respect, unconditional love, and the understanding that every person matters just as they are. The days of being the overlooked daughter, the family's afterthought, they're behind me now. This is just the start of me taking control of my own story and writing it my way.